When it comes to wine, the west coast of the United States doesn't just swirl the glass. It shakes the whole bottle, spills a little on the table, and keeps pouring. It's bold, ambitious, and unapologetically expressive. From Napa's high-gloss, ultra-premium Cabernet Sauvignon to Oregon's quiet, contemplative, and earthy Pinot Noirs, West Coast wine culture has evolved from a niche curiosity into a globally recognized juggernaut. It didn't happen overnight. This is a scene built one glass at a time, through generations of trial, error, vision, and sheer determination. It's a blend of history, marketing savvy, geological luck, and a little bit of that laid-back California cool. It's undeniably American in personality. Bold, unafraid of reinvention, and often driven by a pioneering spirit. But its roots dig deep into European soil, borrowing techniques, traditions, and grape varietals from the Old World while rewriting the rules on New World terms. The origins of West Coast wine trace back to the 18th century, when Spanish missionaries, trekking up from Mexico, planted the first Vitis vinifera vines in what is now California. These early plantings were primarily for religious purposes, producing sacramental wine for mission churches. The grapes weren't great, the winemaking was rudimentary, and quality control was mostly left to divine intervention. Still, those early efforts laid the foundation for what would eventually become one of the world's most dynamic wine-producing regions. Flash forward a couple hundred years, through gold rush booms, devastating phylloxera outbreaks, Prohibition's long shadow, and several waves of immigration, and California emerged from the chaos with something to prove. Once dismissed as a land of jug wine and sugary supermarket blends, it slowly transformed itself into a serious contender. Today, California alone is home to more than 4,000 bonded wineries and produces around 90% of all American wine. That's not just dominance. It's a virtual monopoly. When you add Oregon and Washington into the equation, the West Coast becomes a full-blown wine-producing super region, offering a staggering range of styles, climates, and philosophies, each state contributing its own identity to the mix. California stands as the undisputed heavyweight in this tri-state wine colossus. Its landscape reads like a viticultural fantasy. There are endless sunny days that ripen grapes to bold perfection, tempered by coastal fogs that preserve acidity and finesse. Cool nights in high-altitude vineyards provide balance. There's volcanic soil, limestone, clay, sand, loam, sometimes all within a single vineyard. From the rugged coastlines of Mendocino County to the warm, sprawling Central Valley, nearly every grape variety imaginable can find a compatible home here. Cabernet Sauvignon reigns supreme, particularly in Napa Valley, where the climate and soil conspire to produce wines of richness, structure, and age-worthy depth. Napa is the gleaming showroom of California wine. It's polished, expensive, and globally envied. This is where cult producers like Screaming Eagle, Harlan Estate, and Colgan command prices that rival First Growth Bordeaux and Grand Cru Burgundy. Their wines are allocated, auctioned, and whispered about in hushed tones by collectors who sometimes treat them more like art than alcohol. But Napa's fame didn't always shine so brightly. Its global breakthrough came at the 1976 Judgment of Paris, a blind tasting that would change wine history. Organized by a British wine merchant, the event pitted French wines, long seen as the gold standard, against upstart California bottlings. A panel of French judges, to their own disbelief, chose California wines as the winners in both red and white categories. It was a seismic moment, shaking the wine world's hierarchy and putting the West Coast firmly on the global wine map. Sacré bleu, indeed. But West Coast wine culture isn't all silver spittoons, tasting flights in sterile glass towers, and oak-aged prestige priced to intimidate. It's something looser, more improvisational, a mix of tradition and rebellion that reflects the broader culture of the region. It's not uncommon to see a winemaker in dusty jeans pouring natural wine straight from a carboy at a farmer's market, or a surfboard leaning against a barn while biodynamic grapes ferment in old concrete eggs. This is a scene where skateboards, food trucks, and playlists are as much a part of the tasting experience as vintage charts or soil maps. The atmosphere is casual but thoughtful, rooted in agriculture but open to art, and deeply driven by a sense of place that goes beyond geography. Oregon's Willamette Valley, with its cool, misty mornings and rich volcanic soils, has carved out an identity centered around Pinot Noir. The wines from this region don't shout. They speak in soft, layered tones that build over time. These Pinots often draw comparisons to Burgundy, and for good reason. But there's a humility here that keeps the comparison from becoming mimicry. Oregon doesn't need to be France. It's confident being itself. Winemakers here often reject industrial methods and lean toward organic or biodynamic farming, even if certification isn't always the goal. It's more about philosophy than paperwork. The approach is hands-on, intimate, and transparent. Restraint is valued. Subtlety is celebrated. And yet the wines still manage to stand tall in international circles. Just north, Washington State offers a quieter, more stoic contribution to the West Coast wine narrative. The Columbia Valley may not have the coastal glamour of Napa or Sonoma, but its high desert climate, broad daylight swings, and diverse soil types make it a powerhouse for full-bodied reds. Syrah from Walla can be hauntingly aromatic, while Merlot from the Yakima Valley shows structure and depth that's often overlooked by a market obsessed with Cabernet. These wines are bold without being blustery, layered without being overwrought. And because Washington tends to avoid the flash and spectacle of California, its wines remain, for now, something of a well-kept secret, a treasure for those who know where to look. A defining trait of West Coast wine overall is its openness to experimentation and its refusal to be boxed in by tradition. This is a region that encourages risk, reinvention, and a little chaos. In Santa Barbara, Pétillant Naturel, PetNat for short, flows freely, bottled before fermentation finishes to create a fizzy, cloudy, unpredictable wine that feels more like a craft beer than something you'd pair with duck confit. In Oregon, some producers are aging Albarino in clay amphorae buried in the ground. An ancient method reborn as a modern statement. These aren't just gimmicks. They're part of a deeper movement toward wines that reflect both place and personality, not marketing trends or critic scores. That experimental spirit is helping to push West Coast wine into new territory. Many producers are now rejecting the high-alcohol, overripe, heavily oaked style that defined much of the late 1990s and early 2000s. Instead, they're reaching for freshness, acidity, and drinkability. Lower alcohol wines are becoming more common, not because of fashion, but because they make sense. For food, for conversation, for the climate, and for how people actually want to drink now. The shift isn't just stylistic, it's philosophical. The new generation of winemakers is thinking long-term, about sustainability, transparency, and accessibility. Compared to the old world, West Coast wine operates with far fewer rules, and that's both its greatest strength and its most persistent branding challenge. There's no strict appellation system here, like France's AOC or Italy's DOCG, to dictate what grapes can grow where or what techniques can be used. In California especially, the boundaries are more geographical than ideological, and that allows for endless diversity, but also creates confusion for consumers trying to understand what a Paso Robles blend or a Sonoma Coast Chardonnay really means. The freedom can lead to brilliance, but it can also lead to inconsistency. Burgundy is revered precisely because it is so rigorously defined. You know what you're getting, more or less. California, Oregon, and Washington are still writing their own rulebooks, which makes for exciting wines, but a messier narrative. Of course, not everyone outside the United States is pouring a glass of Napa Cabernet Sauvignon with their evening meal. In many parts of Western Europe, American wine carries a certain reputation, one that's not always flattering. It's often perceived as expensive, assertive, and occasionally overwhelming in both flavor and personality. Think more Hollywood blockbuster than subtle literary fiction. To some European wine lovers, American wine, particularly the bold reds of California, can seem brash, overdone, and lacking the nuance or restraint traditionally favored in places like Bordeaux or Burgundy. French drinkers, especially, tend to remain deeply loyal to their own terroirs. Wine is embedded in their national identity, tied to centuries-old traditions and regional pride. When they do venture beyond their borders, a $200 bottle from California has to do more than taste good. It has to justify itself against a Burgundy or Rhone of similar vintage, lineage, and prestige, often coming up against skepticism before the cork is even pulled. In countries like Germany or the United Kingdom, American wines often appear at opposite ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, there are the mass-market labels, Gallo, Barefoot, Yellowtail, that dominate grocery store shelves, selling sweet, approachable wines in bulk at low prices. On the other, there are the ultra-premium imports, cult Cabernets, rare Pinot Noirs, and limited edition blends that arrive with hefty price tags after crossing the Atlantic. This bifurcation makes West Coast wine a bit of a curiosity in those markets, something you try at a restaurant or bring back from a trip to California rather than something you keep stocked at home. The middle ground, the thoughtful $25 bottle that makes up much of the domestic U.S. wine scene, is often lost in translation due to import costs, distribution barriers, and brand recognition challenges abroad. Still, despite the hurdles, American wines, and especially those made along the West Coast, have managed to build a steady following in select international markets. Northern Europe, with its growing enthusiasm for New World wines, has proven to be an eager audience. Countries like Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands have embraced American bottles with curiosity and growing respect, particularly as importers and sommeliers push beyond the clichés. Japan, with its meticulous culinary culture and openness to high-quality foreign products, has also shown a keen interest in California wines, especially elegant Pinot Noirs and sophisticated Chardonnays. Canada, sharing not only a border, but also a large swath of cultural overlap with the U.S., remains one of the most consistent international consumers of West Coast wine. For Canadian wine lovers, California is familiar and aspirational at the same time. Within the U.S., of course, West Coast wine still sets the tone for the national palate. Whether it's a bottle of oaky Chardonnay opened at a suburban dinner party, a jammy Zinfandel uncorked at a backyard barbecue, or a chilled rosé passed around a beach bonfire, American drinkers often default to California first, sometimes without even thinking about it. These wines are part of the rhythm of everyday life, their presence so constant that they often go unremarked upon, until a particularly great vintage or an offbeat blend surprises and delights someone who thought they knew exactly what to expect. As for the wine culture that surrounds it, it's casual, scrappy, unpretentious, and still evolving. On the West Coast, tasting rooms are less about reverence and more about vibe. The atmosphere leans relaxed rather than refined. You're more likely to be greeted by someone in jeans and a hoodie than a crisp white shirt and tie. Guests might arrive on bikes or in camper vans, often bringing dogs or kids along for the ride. It's not uncommon to sip a flight while sitting on a picnic bench, chatting with the winemaker about soil health, harvest chaos, or which local taco truck has the best salsa. There's a spirit of experimentation that cuts through everything, from the grapes being grown to the labels on the bottles. Many winemakers are self-taught or career switchers, unconstrained by European tradition or pedigree. They're learning as they go, improvising, collaborating, messing up, and trying again. And most of them wouldn't have it any other way. There's also an increasing awareness of sustainability, climate change, and access, topics that have begun to shape not just how wine is made, but who gets to make it and who feels welcome in the tasting room. A new generation of West Coast producers is pushing the industry toward transparency, inclusivity, and environmental responsibility. They're challenging the old wine world's gatekeeping and rewriting the rules in real time. So where does West Coast wine stand in the global hierarchy? It no longer needs to prove that it can compete with Europe. It already has. Instead, it's carving out its own identity, one that embraces boldness, creativity, and a certain rebellious charm. It doesn't always hit the same notes as a Bordeaux or a Barolo, but that's the point. It's not trying to. It's making something different, something uniquely American, something that reflects the landscapes, personalities, and contradictions of the West itself. It may not be for everyone. That's okay. Not every palate is built for high-alcohol Zinfandels or skin-contact orange wines fermented in garage-sized barrels. But for those who are curious, open-minded, or just thirsty for something new, West Coast wine offers an endless frontier. Whether it's a funky natural Grenache from Santa Barbara, a lean Gamay from Oregon, or a Syrah from Walla Walla with enough structure to stop traffic, there's always something waiting to be discovered. Because on the West Coast, there's always another bottle, and chances are it's unconventional, delicious, and probably chilled, just the way they like it.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199 X, we're here just for you.